Pokémon as a franchise is bountiful with reasons to love it. It's a vast world full of mystical, magical, and wonderful creatures living in harmony with people alongside them. No matter your tastes, there is a Pokémon out there waiting for you to find it, that you can learn to adore it and all of its intricacies. The people in the world too are colourful and lovable, some with such depth that their portrayals incite a strong relatability for us. But it's nonetheless a franchise privy to the same faults and problems as any other. It's far from perfect. Many of the games in recent years suffer from feeling rushed or uninspired in places, and in some cases are genuinely hard to play. Such is true for the most recent releases, Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet, and it's such a shame to have to admit that. These were games that embarked on a new journey for the Pokémon franchise, taking a step outside of the comfortable and rigid confines the series chose to become stagnant within. It gave way to an open world, one that doesn't dictate your journey, but rather provides you with the tools and narrative to guide your own unique journey. It's a game whose attention to scale and detail were unlike those that came before it, doing away with random encounters and trying to breathe life into a world that feels real and lived in. And for all this and more, these games are undeniably admirable. This, however, is only a part of the truth. In reality, these games are also riddled with bugs and unappealing in their visual style and substance. They are games whose efforts in exploring a scale before unseen gave way to stuttering, pop-in, awkward difficulty scaling, and more. They are games that need more time, more passion, and more heart to be put into them for the sake of bringing life to a truly special landmark in the Pokémon franchise. But as I said, these are not games devoid of heart and soul. There are many times where ignoring the blatant disregard for polish is not really possible, but there are two other moments where this game's desire to evolve beyond the boundaries of traditional Pokémon creates such a genuinely immersive and breathtaking experience. And I think it comes as no surprise to anyone when I say that such truths are most evident in the depths of Pokémon Scarlet and Violet's Area Zero. Area Zero is a hallmark for the achievements and potential within this franchise. Not only is it a remarkably unique setting for Pokémon standards, but it is an environment that brings out the dynamic decisions and evolutions Scarlet and Violet offer to the franchise as a whole, from the narrative to the gameplay, even user interface elements as a whole. There is no experience in the Pokémon franchise quite like it, and its wonder-inducing, awe-inspiring energy is something worth appreciating. The premise of Area Zero alone is something genuinely mesmerizing. The moment we descend into its depths with our friends at our side, we're presented this fantastical realm, glistening with otherworldly light, with crashing waterfalls and sprawling hills and valleys as far as the eye can see. Powerful Pokémon roam this land with no care. It is a place seemingly free from human interference. As we continue to explore, we are presented with midnight caves that dig deep into the earth, where rainbow terra crystals bloom like flowers and paradoxical Pokémon uniquely make their homes. Such a spectacle is something only comparable to the Distortion world of Pokémon Platinum. But unlike the Distortion world, this is a natural, real, and alive-feeling world that simply exists peacefully at the core of Paldea. Such a world is garnished wonderfully with the enthralling choir, whose voices embellish the sparkling melody and timbre of the bassy brass instruments that come with the track's opening, setting up for the more techno-futuristic synths that follow, lending itself nicely to the prevailing themes of future and past. Further, these tones are not halted by the traditional Pokemon formula, and that's where the importance of Area Zero's execution comes into play. This is to say, while older Pokemon games interrupt the music of a given locale to transition to a battle scene, Scarlet and Violet's dynamic battle system does away with such tradition and allows for a seamless, immersive transition into encounters in this world. This kind of environment is not something Pokemon allows players to explore typically. As mentioned, Area Zero would be most readily likened to the Distortion World, a one-visit story location whose path is linear, serving only as a tone setter for the narrative at play. The next closest might be the Ultra game's Ultra Megalopolis, a setting even less engaging and explorable than the Distortion World. The fact that we have a new environment that captures the same kind of mystique and charm of the few seen in the past, while being a truly sprawling world we are not only free to, but encouraged to explore without limitation, is huge for the franchise. While it makes sense to focus on some grounded settings, the forests and mountains and deserts we often see, so that the franchise is able to be a utopic reflection of our reality, there is also no reason to deny this fantasy world of fantastical environments, and Area Zero is a key example of how such scenes can be incredibly effective on that front. And to be able to immerse ourselves in such a world fully and wholly, including engaging in battle with a myriad of Pokemon who call this place home, without interruption or pause, is a massive bound for the world a Pokemon game can foster. These elements of presentation are simple, dynamic changes, but they go a long way in letting a narrative be formed, uninterrupted by the limitations of what Pokemon has been. Speaking of the narrative established in Area Zero, it is one further enhanced by deeper mechanical dynamic evolutions of the franchise as well. Scarlet and Violet tells 3 separate stories in its base game, each constructing the foundations and developments of a character we can connect to. Admittedly, these character arcs showcase some of the strongest scenario and character writing instances from across the franchise at large, which is already impressive. Area Zero takes these connections and enriches them further in a couple ways. Obviously, it does so by exploring unique interactions between characters that are unreliant on the voiceless protagonist character. Rarely do we see group dynamics in the people of Pokemon games, and so often are we simply talked to. As such, being a part of a group, we get to see how the characters whose tones with ourselves we are so used to speak to each other, creating deeper and more alive feeling people. Of course, in the traditional format of a Pokemon game, this would only manifest as a barrage of A presses as we sift through dialogue boxes that bring a pause to our adventure, but in Area Zero, things are a little different. It's a simple, seemingly negligible change, but it goes a long way. Area Zero respects players' times and immersion by allowing players to engage in the unfolding dialogues and expositions while exploring the world that those expositions directly relate to. You aren't confined to a static view of the world as your friends discuss their concern or excitement for this dangerous, magical place. You get to be alive in that dangerous, magical place. You get to feel that concern and wonder at the same time as the characters around explore those feelings too. Such rigidity has been the norm of the franchise for a long time, and it was the norm for most of Scarlet and Violet too. But the willingness to abandon these shackles in the depths of Area Zero shows promise and a desire to grow. The last thing I wish to bring up about Area Zero rears its head at the climax of Paldea's storytelling, and while it is an even smaller detail, it is one that, to me, really encapsulates well Area Zero and its dynamic evolution of the Pokemon franchise. The scene is set. After exploring this dystopian, utopian, false paradise with a ragtag group of friends, learning the history of a world that hosts creatures whose very existence defies explanation, you are greeted by the Professor, parent to your friend, and the reason you have the legendary Pokemon who has been your partner from the beginning. You learn quickly that this isn't the true Professor, but rather an AI infused with their desires, and after moments of exposition, you uncover the time machine of Paldea. What follows are some of the most intense moments in a Pokemon game yet. Gorgeous cutscenes serve as an introduction to a battle of proportions before being unrealized in the Pokemon franchise. The overarching narrative of past and future, of the natural and unnatural in the world, is further fueled with quick engagements that take place in the midst of a battle against before unseen adversaries. And when you finally come out on top, you are able to lay the machine that would cause the destruction of Paldea and its ecosystem to rest. Until the depths of the original professor's desires for Area Zero are realized, and the AI yet again challenges you to a battle. That moment, that tiny detail, the way the integration of the diegetic world and its narrative and tones with the extra diegetic user interface in a moment of shock and dread as our journey reaches its truest peak. This moment, building up from dynamic mechanical changes, narrative changes and more, leading into a moment of deconstructing the very interface of the game itself. That is the manifestation and acclamation of Area Zero and the dynamic evolution of Pokemon. That is Pokémon Scarlet and Violet's piece of heart.